Welcome back to the Motion Raceworks YouTube channel. Today we have an exciting product to install on Bubba's Nova, the 1972 Nova you've seen on this channel before, and it is our new XS3 Extreme Street TBM brakes. Now this product is a development from 30 years of braking technology that came with TBM when we acquired it and put it underneath the Motion Raceworks brand. TBM, as you may or may not know, is a racing brake. From Ultra 4 to monster trucks to circle track, drag racing, and everything in between. When we started this project, we took all of the technology, all of the development over the last 30 years that made TBM brakes so great and created the ultimate street performance brake, and that is the XS3 caliper and brake system that you see. We spent the last 2.5 years developing, testing, refining, and engineering a caliper that not only looks great, but performs great on and off the track, which gives us a unique starting point to create the ultimate street performance brake. We designed this caliper to work perfectly with our 12-inch ProCast rotor. This thing is a perfect balance of weight, durability, and everyday use. It provides awesome stopping power, as well as the durability you hope to have on a daily driven style hot rod. A couple of the other goals of this kit were to not only provide excellent stopping power, but to also keep it lightweight. We know that there's a fine balance between street strip. A lot of our customers have been asking for something that can be used for extended periods with more durability built into them. So we find this brake to be a perfect balance of that. Another point that we were shooting for when we developed this kit was to create something that fits behind 15-inch steel wheels as well as 15-inch racing wheels. When you combine all these components, you have the perfect balance. Building hot rods of our own, we also saw the need to have speed sensor capabilities built into this. So you'll notice that this bracket has speed sensor built in, and the hub has the ability to bolt a speed wheel on the back. This gives you a lot of flexibility to add traction control, speedometer, and whatever else you would love to use a speed sensor for. This kit was literally designed to cover all the bases. Combine all of those things with a brake pad that's dependable, low on dust, and has great stopping power. We picked the Hawk HPS pad. It is the perfect match for a street performance brake system like the XS3. So today we're going to go ahead and install this on the front of this 72 Nova. This has the exact same spindle as a 67 to 69 Camaro, 64 to 72 Chevelle, and many of the other popular GM muscle cars from the 60s and 70s. We have these available for a number of different platforms, but today we wanted to show you the install so that you could understand how it goes together, see the fit and finish of it all, and have something to reference when you buy your own XS3 kit and go to do an install. Let's get started on this install. Of course, I picked blue. Goes well with Bubba's Nova. So we'll start with the basics. We're going to start with this lightweight hub. As you can see, this very much represents our other TBM brakes in the fact that it's lightweight. We wanted to build a kit that you could take to the racetrack and still has a lightweight component to it. It might not be as light as our racing brakes. We wanted to bridge the gap between heavy duty and our drag racing brakes, and we think we accomplished that here. So very much similar to our drag racing brakes. These will come with the bearing races pre-installed, and then the bearings will come separate, so you'll have to grease them. From here, we're going to go ahead and lay this thing face down, and we're going to go ahead and assemble our adapter ring to our rotor, and I'll show you how that's done. So we're going to take this billet aluminum adapter ring and drop it down. There's a locating shoulder down below, so it'll perfectly center it. And then we're going to take these 7/16 bolts, torque them to 70 foot-pounds. Remember to put some red Loctite on them. You can also safety wire them at this point. It is important to note that proper understanding of how safety wire works is necessary for it to be a successful thing. A lot of people get lost in safety wire and have a false confidence of how well it may or may not be working. So make sure you do your research on how to safety wire. There's tons of great videos on the internet. However you choose to secure it, make sure you torque it to 70 foot-pounds, and we always recommend red Loctite. So from here, it might be easier to wait to torque this until the rotor's on. You have a little bit more leverage. So we'll go ahead and flip this over, and the rotor bolts flat to this surface. So there are 8 5/16 bolts. So use your preferred method of securing these. I prefer red Loctite, but some people prefer safety wire. I'm not a professional safety wire person. I also keep up on making sure things are tight on my vehicles quite often. So, all right, now that I got both the rotor bolts to the adapter and the adapter to the hub all torqued, red Loctited, we're about ready to put this thing on. It's a good time to show you the speed wheel that we sell. I'll put the link for this down in the description below. It's a kit that gives you everything you need, including a quick connect M5 cable You can just snip the end off the other side of it. It'll have 3 wires, 0 to 5 volt, like any other 0 to 5 volt sensor. Hook that up to your ECU data logger, whatever you're using it on, and you're good to go. So when you buy this speed wheel, there's 5 holes here. You'll red Loctite this thing and just bolt it directly down to it. And then the pickup will come off of your bracket, which is basically sitting the perfect distance away from the hub assembly. Again, this is an optional kit. We know not everybody needs it, so it's sold a la carte. But definitely if you need it, it's great to have it. You'll also notice that these rotors have a black zinc. This color can vary slightly from lot to lot, but the main takeaway is that we wanted this to be a long-lasting, corrosion-resistant rotor, and that's kind of the main purpose for it. It's not to be perfectly black forever. It's not to be perfectly black to start with, because as soon as you use them once, all of that's gone. So. From here, we're going to take the supplied Timken bearings, grease them up, and put the bracket on the car, and then slide the hub over it. We use a standard Timken bearing. That way, this thing is completely serviceable. You can buy bearings about anywhere for these things. We wanted to keep them standard and easy to maintenance, so that if you have your car for a long time, if you have to change a bearing, you can. One last thing we need to do before we go to mount the hub on the actual car is put the supplied half 20 studs in this thing. You can actually put them in after this is all assembled. Same thing, having a rotor attached to it and torqued down gives you a little bit of added strength to hold on to this. That way you can torque it with a friend or by yourself, however you decide to do it. Again, red Loctite will keep these things secure. For video's sake, I'm not putting red Loctite on it, but I always suggest putting red or blue Loctite on all these bolts. This is a 5/8 bolt, goes right in there, and then down below a 1/2 inch bolt with a washer and nut that go on the back side. At this point, you would want to go ahead and put your speed sensor in there, preferably ahead of time, but you can actually put it in afterwards, just a little bit easier ahead of time. And then we're going to go ahead and torque these both down. So the reason I go ahead and do this top one first is because it kind of squares itself up. And in doing that, you can actually see that behind this bolt here requires some shims to keep it flat. Otherwise, it's going to pull itself at an angle. So we're going to go ahead and add some shims to make sure that thing's square, perpendicular, and flat. So this one actually, the perfect amount was 3 of these 30,000 shims. Again, yours may vary significantly from this depending on the age, if it's been modified, and so on. So this top bolt's going to get torqued to 80 foot-pounds, and the bottom one's 60. You'll notice a lot of these spindles, especially older vehicles, have the ability to put the caliper on the front or the back. I'm putting it on the back because my brake line's there, so it's more convenient to run it that way. If space requires or you have room, you can always put it however you want. That's why our caliper brackets are actually labeled -1 and -2, not left and right, because it has some flexibility depending on what vehicle and what platform. Last thing we'll do is put a seal in this before we put it on. That way, if everything goes together right, we don't have to take it back apart. One important thing to note is that typically you want the slots going slanting backwards towards the car. We actually tested this both ways in the 2 years we were developing this kit, and we found it made no difference, but it is definitely more appealing to the eye, and most people will say you're wrong if you don't have it that way. So definitely do that before you torque all your bolts and start installing it yourself. From here, you'll install your outer bearing, make sure it's greased properly, and replace your washer, your nut, and then tighten this thing down to a rotational resistance that you like, and put in your cotter pin. One thing, if this is your first brake install, which for some of you it may be, after you drive a few miles, it's always a good idea to come back and check this as the bearings wear in. Depending on how much grease you actually have on the surface of the bearing as it wears off, it will start to open up and then you'll have more play. You obviously don't want any end play in the bearings because that can be damaging to the bearings, but you don't want it too tight where it won't turn. There's obviously a happy medium, but it's something definitely worth checking, just like lug nuts, shortly after install. All right, at this point you want to verify you have the correct caliper. The bleeder should always be facing at the highest point that allows the air to get out of the system properly. If you don't have it like that, chances are you'll never bleed the brakes correctly. But good thing is, a little tech tip for you guys built into this video. You can actually take it loose and rotate it on the rotor itself. Say for instance, if you have a caliper like this, You can actually move it around. It doesn't have to be bolted to anything, just has to have the pads in it. You can bleed it and then put it back to where it goes. Although it's more preferential to just go ahead and have the bleeder facing straight up. So in your kit, you'll have one for each side. Make sure you clock them accordingly, and your life will be a whole lot easier. One other thing I should note is these calipers all come tested. As soon as we assemble them, we test them. That way we can ensure that when you get these, they are leak-free. We want to make sure that there's no possibilities for it. It helps you troubleshoot. If you have a leak, it's most likely from a line or a fitting that you loosened up in the process. So just a little bit of peace of mind for us and for you. From here, we're going to go ahead and mock this up. We want to make sure that the rotor is centered perfectly in the caliper. This allows the pads to move equally both sides. The pistons inside the caliper will actually equalize, but if one gets pushed out too far or not enough, they start to wear a little bit differently, so it's preferred to go ahead and just have it spaced. Plus, the way we package this rotor with the 810 rotor, things are a little bit tight. So you want to make sure it's spaced evenly before you torque it down, that way the pads slide in correctly. At this point, you may need some of the supplied shims inside the kit to get things centered how you would like. This one looks like it lays out about perfectly, so we'll go ahead and loosely snug it down and make sure the pads go in, and if they do, we'll torque everything down and send her home. One thing we're really proud about in this kit is how much we make here in-house. This caliper comes in as raw aluminum. We machine it on our CNC machines here in Bradenton, Florida. The pistons inside of it, the hubs, the adapters, much of the hardware, it's all made here with pride at our Bradenton, Florida facility. One other cool thing is we have this safety clip pin. That way when you install this thing, it's not coming back out until you decide it's coming out. So it has a nice little safety mechanism. It is not terribly hard to take on and off, but it secures the pads to make sure that they not only move freely so that they don't get bound up, but also that they stay in there. We'll go ahead and slide this pin in here and install a safety clip on the back side. Okay, once everything's bolted, secured, and pads are in it, and the pad pin and safety clip are in it, pretty much done. One thing I will note, make sure you clean off your rotor as you normally would with brakes. Get all the grease and debris off it. It's important for braking procedures. We have a great set of braking procedures on our website in the listing. It's definitely worth reading, from proper pedal ratio and master cylinder bore size. These things, any brakes need the proper pressure to operate correctly, to pad bedding procedures, bleeding procedures, and everything else in between. Take a look at it. If you didn't know any of these tips, it's definitely going to improve the quality of the braking system on not only just this vehicle, but any vehicle you do in the future. Proper performance on a braking system starts with the foundation, and all the details matter. One other thing I want to note, we talked about it earlier, but these things fit exceptionally well on 15-inch wheels. This is a perfect example. We wanted a drag racing style front runner to fit on these things so that you could take it street and strip uses and not just one purpose only. So not only will it fit a nice 15-inch street wheel, but it'll also fit a drag racing wheel. Anything from here up should fit just fine. It's always a give and take when it comes to brakes and wheel fitment, and it's something, this thing has steel wheels, we wanted it to fit really well. Of course, there's always a little bit of oddities. Sometimes there's a big weld inside, so on and so forth. We do have a nice lineup of perfect fit wheel spacers. Occasionally they might be needed, but in that case, it looks nice, they fit nicely, and they center themselves right on the studs. As with anything, a proper professional should probably be installing these unless you consider yourself competent. Take consideration in this of your own safety and other people's safety around you. Another thing to note is to use the proper brake fluid. There are a number of different brake fluids out there that work really well. Dot 3, Dot 4, and Dot 5.1 are advised for these situations. Silicone-based brake fluids, as often seen in Dot 5, are not recommended as it will cause seals to swell and decrease brake performance and potentially cause leaks. The last thing you should do after bleeding is make sure you put a wheel on this thing and make sure it clears perfectly. The last thing you want to do is have this thing go out and have the wheel gall up on it. It can cause damage to the wheel, the caliper, and anything in between. One last thing to note is that the whole system needs to work together on a braking system, from pedal ratio to master cylinder size, front and rear brakes, potentially proportioning valve, as well as a fluid. If you have questions on a braking system on your car, definitely give us a call. Our staff is happy to work through things. Our personal goal is to have a braking system that outperforms your personal expectations, because then everybody wins. As of today, we have about 10 of these platforms built and designed from front and rear brakes for different platforms. We have more on the way, and we'll be releasing them regularly over the next months and years, along with several other brake options. Our intention is to bring the XS3 platform from modern to old and everywhere in between. So take a look and see if we have one for your application. Thanks for tuning in, guys, to the Motion Raceworks YouTube channel, where we also cover TBM brakes. We'll see you next time.